Welcome to In the Cut, the show that gets you up close and personal with BN and our community. Good evening, morning, or afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special episode of In the Cut, the show that gets you up close and personal with Black non-believers in our community. I am Mandisa Thomas, founder and president of Black Non-Believers. In the Cut is a production of Black Non-Believers, which is a 501c3 organization. Headquartered in the Atlanta area, we connect with other Blacks and allies who are living free of religion and might otherwise be shunned by family and friends by providing a caring, friendly, and informative community. Instead of accepting dogma, we determine truth and morality through reason and evidence. And as always, the mission of Black non-believers is to provide secular fellowship, nurture and support non-believers in coming out, also known as open identification, encourage pride in non-religious communities, educate the public on the history and current state of non-belief in the Black community, and organize events and charitable causes. And you can learn more on our website at BlackNonbelievers.org, which is in the description of this video and will also be shared in the live chat. And BN welcomes all regardless of age, gender identity, sexual identity, national origin, or racial identity. However, our work and our content prioritizes Black non-religious voices. And as we close out Black History Month, thank goodness for a leap year, because this is a leap day, we are fulfilling the part of our mission where we educate the public on the history and current state of non-belief in the Black community. And we are doing so by discussing a very, very important subject, which is reparations, financial reparations for the descendants of chattel slavery. And for those of you who are familiar, we are referring primarily to the transatlantic slave trade, in which millions of Africans were trafficked over to the United States and the Caribbean for the purposes of unpaid labor. And so this really has had an impact on the globe and around the world. And, it is important for us, if we are really paying attention to history, and also as we are looking to change things in our communities, it is important for us to examine the part of racial injustice that includes the financial impact that this has had on the descendants of the slave trade, and also the economic factors that still impact us to our detriment. And the history of reparations, we are going to talk about that. I'm going to bring on my wonderful co-host for this evening, Cynthia McDonald, who is from our Chi-Town affiliate, and you know her from the nonprofits and on the Skeptic Haven Network. We will be discussing that more, and we will be talking about the history of reparations, misconceptions about reparations, and also what we can do as far as helping push legislation forward for this initiative. We welcome everyone who is watching to comment, post your questions in the live chat section. We will be looking at them and responding accordingly. So, we will also be sharing links throughout the broadcast so that you can review and learn more about. So we appreciate you tuning in. We thank you all for celebrating Black History Month in 2024, and also engaging in this very important and public referendum on reparations. And so with that, I'd like to bring on Cynthia McDonald, who again is our Chi-Town affiliate leader. in Chicago. And she's also a fellow member of Godless Gospel, and has been an advocate, an activist in the reparations movement for some time. So welcome, Cynthia, and welcome to this important discussion. We're gonna, if you have a few words to say before we get into it, yeah, please take it away.
It is an absolute honor, first off, to be here with you, my dear friend, Miss Mandisa Thomas. And actually, even more so of an honor, and for me to tell you again, happy Black History Month. That should be celebrated 365 days of the year. This being a late leap year, 366 days of the year. And I am honored even more so to have this discussion, this very important discussion with you, and to dispel a lot of myths about reparations and misconceptions that people may possess. I'm hoping that we can put them to bed this evening. Maybe. We'll see.
Yes, and so part of the reason why, and we definitely, you and I definitely discussed doing this referendum, this episode,
Mhm.
because after the Thomas Paine event that took place last month, which we co-sponsored along with the Free Thought Society, the Freedom for Religion Foundation, the Secular Coalition for America. If you missed it, we will be sharing that link in the chat. We received some correspondence
We did.
from a non-Black atheist / humanist who was actually against reparations. And truth be told, sadly, we have come across quite a few humanists we have come across quite a few people in the non-religious community who who have expressed their dissent, if you will, about reparations, and the financial piece to that. I think we're also going to talk probably about some of the division within the reparations movement, which is only fair to discuss.
Yes.
Because it has created some challenges in moving legislation forward, and so that really isn't helpful to things. But we it is important for us to be honest in this discussion about why we're doing it. And so we really, as an organization, again, we are community building, but we pride ourselves on good and proper information, and we encourage people to do the research on these topics that do impact Black communities, because this is certainly one of them. And we would be remiss if we did not cover aspects of racial justice, which we do, by discussing all aspects of reparations and how Black folks have been impacted by not receiving reparations. Sure, there has been plenty of progress in Black communities and among Black folks, but this is definitely a piece that does need to be addressed and resolved. And so I appreciate the ongoing movement. I know as an organization we do, and Cynthia, you do as well. So with that, again, please do share your questions in the chat, and comments in the chat. And we're going to get into some history of reparations. So, Cynthia, if you'd like to kick that part off as to, the history of it, how not just the conversation, but how the initiative came about for reparations for the formerly enslaved.
Of course. Since you mentioned Thomas Paine, I think it's probably a good idea to start in that area. But before I do, I just want to lay a little bit of foundation when we're talking about slavery, specifically in America, and how it moved from being like a pocket institution for colonies to the foundation that created the wealth of this current nation and was a catalyst to make the United States an economic world power. So, recorded, I believe that I know that like some scholars and other people have written that uh, the first um, the first ship from Britain that actually brought over Africans to America at that particular time. It wasn't the United States yet because it was still colonies. Was roughly around 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia. But I think it's very important to mention that Africans coming over through the slave trade over the Atlantic was as early as the early 1500s, usually starting with the Portuguese, the Spanish, and then after that, England came into the whole fold and was the biggest exporters of slaves during the height of the transatlantic slave trade over to the New World. Um, when we get to fast forward, let's to 1700s, sooner to 1770s, um, the America ends up writing a Declaration of Independence because they want to break free away from the crown and create their own nation. We all heard of the Declaration of Independence that was penned by Thomas Jefferson. And then a war started. One of the first casualties of the war was Crispus Attucks, who was a Black man who was enslaved in the United States. And then they happened to win that war, and the United States was formed. There was a Continental Congress, and then the first actual Constitution, the Constitution, not the Articles of Confederation, but the Constitution that we use as the bar trade for the law, was actually drafted and adopted in 1789. Now, in that time period, we have our first president, which is good old wooden teeth George Washington. Then we have John Adams, and then we come to Thomas Jefferson. Now, Thomas Jefferson then gets a letter from an activist, abolitionist, and also a pretty well known, and I might as well just call him an atheist. I believe that he was an atheist, was Thomas Paine. He was definitely anti religion. And he wrote a letter to George Washington, which basically asked who told him a few little oughts that he had that was going on in the States at the time. And one of the things that he talked about was the atrocities and the horridness of slavery. Because one of the things that was hotly debated when the Constitution was formed was representation. Now, we knew that one of the main reasons why the United States was formed because their whole thing was taxation without representation. In other words, I'm paying you, England, United Kingdom, taxes off of my earnings to be, I guess, a citizen, and I'm over here, but I have no representative voice in your government. Everything goes through the monarchy and parliament. That's it. There's no representation for any persons that's actually in the Americas. So when we get to form when the Continental Congress comes together and forms actually the Constitution, there was a debate about representation. And part of the debate was involved with slavery. So the southern portion of the colonies had more plantations than some parts of the northern portion of the colonies, and they wanted to count all of the people, including slaves, to be within that within representation government. But you had some that said, "But wait a minute, slaves are not considered people; they're considered property. So, A, are we going to keep slaves? And B, should they even have like to be counted as a person per se for representation so that we can know how many people we can send to Congress to speak on your behalf or not. So there was the 3/5 compromise. And this is where we get that slaves are counted as 3/5 of a person, because since they were only considered property, they could not have full representation as a full human being, which meant at that particular time, white, male, and landowner. Now, Thomas Paine talked about how egregious the institution was, and how it was even to the point where the let me before I'm going to read this part of his letter, and there is some dated language in it, people, so please don't get triggered when I talk when I actually read this particular portion of the of the actual letter. Just give me one moment while I pull it up, because I want to make sure that I'm getting to the right part. So give me a moment. Okay, Google does not want me to be great. It does not want me to be great. So I'm going to have to do some paraphrasing. But basically what he said is that the way that the slave is treated was absolutely brutal, that Black women slaves were treated worse than your savage. He was specifically talking about indigenous people of America, and that you, Thomas Jefferson, should not only free the slaves, but you should also pay them for the labor that they have wrought as a slave. So we have a pretty early portion, I would say, like that's like in the early 1800s, of an abolitionist per se that was speaking on behalf of economic repair on of the slave. Now, once we fast forward, we get to the 1830s, and there is a rise of more abolitionists that are calling for slavery to be completely taken off. Okay. Now, then we get to the presidential election of Lincoln, and it was very much so known that Lincoln was an abolitionist, and a lot of the South were very concerned that one of the things that Lincoln was going to do was actually abolish slavery. So when he was elected, you had secession. You had different states that was seceding from the Union, and they formed the Confederacy of America. And that's where you get your rebel flag, even though that was not the first flag of the rebels, but that's neither here nor there, regardless. So a civil war was fought over slavery. The North wins, thanks to Frederick Douglas imploring Lincoln to allow ex-slaves to fight on behalf of the Union for their freedom, and he did, and that's the main turning point of the Civil War in order for for the North to win. And then we get to General Order Number 15. General Order Number 15 was by General Tecumseh Sherman, who was a Union Army leader general, and he met with I guess like leaders in the community, like Black leaders of the community. It was mostly like ex-slaves and pastors, and said, "What is it that you need in order for you to go forward and for you to prosper?" And they said, "We need land and so that we can work it and we can feed our families and we can prosper, etc., etc." So that's where we get the 40 acres land grants, or the whole thing, like Spike Lee says, 40 acres and a mule. However, that order was rescinded once Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, and Andrew Johnson becomes president. Because at that particular time, you had your opposite party at that he was a Democrat, and at that particular time the Dixiecrats were the were like the party of the GOP now. So he basically rescinded all just about everything that Lincoln did. And then he even he even vetoed the 14th Amendment, which gave all people equal protection under the law, including ex-slaves, regardless of your creed, your color, your race, your all that stuff, right? But when he vetoed it, Congress put it into effect, adding the Civil Rights Act of 1866. So then one of the things that we still didn't get is these land grants, because what ended up happening is that Johnson gave reparations, but he gave the reparations to the former plantation owners. They were able to get compensated for all the slaves that they lost. They got their, if they signed a pact saying that they will no longer do insurrection against the Union, that everything is forgiven and they can get their land back. They can get everything that they lost in the war back, and they were able to flourish. And then we even had the expansion to the West, where white peasants coming over from Europe was able to get free land as long as they, and they were be able to claim it. The United States gave millions and millions and millions of acres of land and a lot of this was to white immigrants that were coming over from Europe at that particular time. That was the Land Grant Western Act, I believe, the Homestead Act of 1862. But the ones who could not participate in that were ex-slaves, African Americans, Black people. So we had early activists that were trying to come together to actually do some work in order to get compensation for the ex-slaves. And that's where you get Callie House and also Reverend Isaac Dickerson. They formed an organization where they had ex-slaves sign up, and they were lobbying and petitioning the government to come up with a pension fund for all slaves who were formerly enslaved in the United States, so that they can receive compensation for the work that they did. Because what ended up happening is that at the end of the Civil War, you had 4 million plus ex-slaves, men, women, children, without a penny to their name. They were not able to, a lot of them were illiterate, so they didn't have anything to themselves in order for them to be able to start over. No capital whatsoever, and they had no safety net because the government gave it all over to white people. And so Callie House's argument, along with Isaac Dickerson and the ones who were with them, were saying, pay us for what they owe. Unfortunately, we had their particular movement sabotaged by, white supremacy, and you also had the opening of the doors of Jim Crow laws that did the whole separate thing. And at that particular time, you had a white terrorism towards ex-slaves who were in the United States for over 100 years. You also had 2 institutions that were actually created for ex-slaves in order for them to get resources and also for them to be able to build wealth. That was the Freedmen's Bureau and the Freedmen's Bank. But the Freedmen's Bureau lasted all of less than 7 years. It was completely defunded, and it was supposed to be a bureau that's supposed to give different resources like food, education, housing to ex-slaves. That was completely, but the Dixiecrats did not want to fund it anymore. So they did another compromise with the North, and then they got rid of it. And then you had the Freedmen's Bank, where for freedmen who were the ex-slaves of the United States put money into this particular bank so that they actually can have the savings, grow wealth, etc., use it as capital to do a business, whatever. And the people who were running it at the time were older white men, old white men, who used it to fund their own venture capital projects that did not, that didn't go nowhere, that went absolutely nowhere. So a lot of money was lost. And there, at that particular time, there was no FDIC. So these accounts were not insured. Even Frederick Douglass became the president of the Freedmen's Bank and put about $15,000 of his money at that time into the bank, but it was not enough to save the bank. He famously said that the Freedmen's Bank was the white man's milk and the black man's cow. So we had a very long, long history of actually trying to get some type of compensation for the atrocities of slavery, but not just slavery, it's Jim Crow. Because that was a time period where there was a lot of Black terror against a lot of terror, specifically domestic terrorism towards Black people in the United States. There were hundreds of towns that were started by hook or crook by Black people who were ex-slaves, who moved and migrated to different parts of the United States, that were either burned down or they were underwater. You also had other egregious policies like redlining that basically had the banks like draw on a map a red line around areas that were concentrated mostly on around Black neighborhoods that said, you can't lend here. We even had projects from the United States, like the highway system, that would oftentimes run a highway right through a prosperous Black district. We are still even dealing with that same issue today, and people are barely getting compensated for their land. So, if we kind of fast forward a little bit more, we go to the Enlightenment stage, Harlem Renaissance, early 1910s, and you have the Garvey movement, which is the Back to Africa movement. And then you also had another young lady at that time to emerge named Audley Moore. She is now affectionately known as Queen Mother Audley Moore, who actually worked very diligently for reparations. And she even wrote a pamphlet back in, I want to say 1961, 1962, where she basically, and I'm just going to read a little bit from it for you. She said, after 244 years of free slave labor and the most inhumane, sinister, and barbaric atrocities which pass in magnitude any savagery perpetrated against human beings in the history of the planet, and an additional 100 years of so-called freedom accompanied by terror, the committee seeking reparations for the descendants of American slaves concludes that the payments of reparations is an absolute necessity if the government of the United States is to ever wipe the slate clean, redeem herself, and pay for the damages she has inflicted upon more than 25 million American citizens who are members of the Black race. The payments for reparations is the only position in America that can take in the interests of justice and make an effort to restore the dignity to 13.1% of her citizenry. She also formed the Ethiopian Women. She had her committee that was specifically for the American descendants of slaves, and she petitioned the United Nations, which ended up in a resolution that said that the United States was absolutely culpable in order to pay those who were formerly enslaved in the United States for slavery. We then have some more time. You had the civil rights movement. You had Dr. Martin Luther King, who was able through that particular movement to secure some legislation that was very key, which included the first domino effect, which was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And after the Voter Rights Act of 1965, And I just found this out, Mandisa, when I was listening to NPR, is that after that act was signed, there were people who actually got together with King and did another march on Washington because they wanted representation for the Black citizens for voting and also other rights in Washington, D.C., because their officials are not elected, they're appointed by the president. I just found that out yesterday. That was interesting. But after those key legislations were signed by Lyndon B. Johnson, King went on a tour and wrote a book called Where Do We Go From Here? It was published, it was his last book that was published in 1967, almost a year before he was assassinated in April of 1968. In that book, he lays out the history of the atrocities of Black people, including slavery. And he talks about, in the last chapter especially, about a key plan when it comes to economic redress to Black Americans that come from slavery, in order for them to be able to finally have an equal footing, the way that they should, because of their labor that they have wrought in the United States. Now we are here, and we do have activists that are currently still working towards reparations, because like we still have a very pervasive wealth gap in the United States between Black and white. It was described back during the 2020 election by Simone. I forgot her last name, but she said it's not a gap, it's a chasm. And that chasm exists because of all the different atrocities, from slavery to Jim Crow to land theft to damn near genocide of African Americans in the United States, socially and economically and even physically, that caused us to have this 99.1 to 1% wealth gap. There was a paper that was written, I want to say back in 2018, 2019, that African Americans are slated to be at zero wealth by 2053. But I would even say that that was sped up because of COVID. Some were even saying by 2030. If there is no economic redress or repair to Black Americans that come from this institution, then, I don't know what it is. Where do we go from here, as King would say?
Yes, thank you so much for the history on that, Cynthia. And for those who are tuning in and for those who may tune in after this live broadcast is done, we have shared links in the chat that you can review. And if you have never heard of Queen Mother Moore, whom I was telling Cynthia the other day, I'm pretty sure that during my childhood, I have probably met her, because I was surrounded by, I was very fully immersed within the Black conscious community in New York. And, conversations about reparations were very, very common. So I'm pretty sure I met her somewhere in the city of New York. And so it's really, really important, once again, to review all of the materials, and even more than what we have displayed here on the show. So what are some of the common misconceptions about reparations, Cynthia, from your work, doing this work for some years? What are some of the things that you hear that are often grossly misrepresented about reparations?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I've been told in this particular space, that reparations is a handout. And I've heard this from Black folk. I heard this from white folk. And I can definitely tell you, no, it is not. As I read from Queen Mother Moore when she said that after 244 years, and this is before the United States was the United States, we still had the institution of slavery. Before, it was mostly tobacco that moved over to indigo and then cotton. And at the height of the agrarian society in the United States, cotton was called King Cotton for a reason. It was the number one exported product from the United States. It is what gave the capital to the United States to even venture into the industrial war. I mean, the industrial revolution. And let's brings me to a second misconception, that that slavery was not the catalyst that made America an economic world power. It was the Industrial Revolution. And I always, when I hear this argument, I'm like, so where did they get the capital in order for them to be able to do the Industrial Revolution? It came from somewhere. Did it just come from the sky? No, it was because of slavery. If you are a business owner, roughly on average, if you have employees, you spend roughly 70% of your revenue on labor alone. America had a 244-year start when it came to labor in the United States. So they were able basically to produce an entire product to export with very little cost when it came to their human resource. Okay, so that's another misconception. Another misconception is the whole thing about, I don't want my tax dollars to pay for reparations. I'm not signing up for that. That one really gets me because, Mandisa, the last time I checked, and I think I told you this, that no elected representative from the federal government, the state government, or even your own municipality come knock on your door and ask you if we can use the money that you paid in taxes to pay for whatever the heck they want to pay for. There are currently two wars that are going, no, there's more than two wars that's going on, but that we are helping to fund. And not one time has any congressional person come to my door, and I know they didn't come to yours, to say, hey, can we fund Ukraine? Hey, can we give money to Israel? Hey, can we give money to Afghanistan? Can we give money here? Can we give money here? No, that has never happened. So the United States has a Congress, which is their legislative branch, and Congress is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And the bills to come out of for legislation come out of Congress, and there's always going to be a money note that's going to be attached to that bill. Once it is sent to the Senate to get looked over, it goes back to the House. If they vote on it, it goes to the president. President can either sign it into law or he can veto it. If he vetoes it, it can go back to Congress, specifically to House of Representatives, and either they can just say, okay, screw it, Joe don't want it, or they can vote to override his veto, and then it becomes law. And that money that comes from taxpayers and also from other expenditures that the United States has pays for that bill, including money that they want to pay for the armed forces, money that they want to pay for infrastructure, money that they want to pay for education, et cetera, et cetera. No one that comes out of those particular holidays are going to ask you specifically to give up any type of money for you to pay for reparations. That's going to be legislation that is done from Congress, signed into law by the president, or voted into law by Congress if it's vetoed, and then a dollar amount is going to be attached to it, and it will be paid out accordingly. You're muted.
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
So there have been a few in recent years legislative bills that have come across the desk of Congress and probably on more of the local levels of government regarding reparations. What do you see, or what has been the catalyst for finally pushing it into legislation?
I definitely think that it was a lot of boots on the ground work from people who are very much so attached to this and really care about reparations. you know, I will keep my personal feelings to myself, but I do have to say that part of the conversation to really make reparations a household topic again was ADOS. And these were people that came together that believed that, you know, reparations is old, they need to be paid, and they advocated for it. Now, there's been splits and schisms and things of this nature that have happened since then, but I will have to definitely give them some credit in order for them to say that, yeah, they're the ones who really, you know, put it back on the map. Because, you know, for a while there, like, reparations really wasn't something that people talked about so ever so often. You might hear it on a debate stage ever so in every now and again, but it was never anything that was considered something serious that people discussed. Even though you had John Conyers since 1989, after the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 signed into law, where the $20,000 to Japanese people who were victims of internment during World War II was paid, that they came up with HR 40. And he introduced it and introduced it and introduced it up until the day that he was no longer in Congress. And it was never, there was never like a vote. There was never and there was never even a committee that was even discussing the viability of the bill in the first place. The bill, after he left and after he passed away, was given to actually Sheila Jackson Lee out of Texas, specifically in the Houston area, and her and some other activists, and especially like I believe in like NARC or in Cobra, what have you, rewrote HR 40, and she reintroduced it on June 19th, 2019 into Congress. There was a whole hearing about it and everything. And it finally got into the Judiciary Committee, where it was debated on. I think that there were two public hearings that was on it. One in 2019. I don't keep on want to say 1919, 2019, and 2021. And then it finally left out of committee, but it's still kind of like in limbo. It's never come to the floor for a vote.
Okay. Yeah, so that is very interesting, and I also find it interesting that they were finally able to sign like Juneteenth as a national holiday. But it's, you know, of course, you know, the issue of reparations is still on the table, you know.
Right.
So one of the, you know, and we will not mention this person. There was someone who tried to make an argument that the church should be the one solely responsible for reparations. And so, you know, it's very interesting. What is it that now, of course, even in your writing, you know, you talk about the church and its complicity, and it was very much an accomplice. It was very much an accomplice to the transatlantic slave trade, and it was blessed in one of the papal bulls in the 1400s.
Right.
And so, what is it that you would say about this simply being a case for a charge against the church that they are responsible for reparations to the descendants of slavery?
The problem with that argument. Okay, well, let me start over. So one of the papal bulls, I know that like one of the misconceptions is that Pope Fabiola actually is the one who did not condemn transatlantic slave trade, but that's not true. He was the one that was he was the one who was around during Columbus. But no, it was actually, I forgot the guy's name, but there was a pope that was actually after him that basically said, "Go ye therefore and steal Africans." Um, and yes, that did happen. And yes, you even had the Catholic Church specifically in the United States and other places that did own slaves, like Georgetown. But the thing about it is that that argument becomes moot because the government is the one that said that slavery can exist and gave even regulations on how you practice said institution. And there was real capital made off of slavery. And it was not just churches that benefited from the institution. It was families, it was businesses, and not just plantations, the insurance companies, Wall Street, shipping yards, even I wish I could remember his name, but it was a mentor who actually created who was like really big in making like a lot of the chains and shackles that that was used to fetter slaves when they were transported. And every time that either a slave trader or a plantation owner would buy his equipment, he would give them a coin with his insignia on it, to show as a receipt and a little memento that you bought some of the best chains in the world to chain up your slaves. Good for you. So this whole notion, and I mean, like, and I'm not saying that the church is not complicit at all. I mean, you just said it, and yes, they are, but they're not the ones that regulated it. They're not the ones who wrote it into constitutional law. They're not the ones who did not go to different state houses and municipalities to say, no, you can, or yes, you can own slaves. Like, no, this is not what happened. So for the whole argument to say that this is a religious issue, and just because religious institutions, like especially like the Southern Baptist Convention, basically created their whole identity around keeping slavery around in the United States and used Levitical law to do it. That's they did, but they cannot use that. But to say that, okay, so since, like, Thea said that it was okay for them to actually have slaves, means that they're the ones who's on the hook to pay? No, not at all.
Yes, and when you mentioned the different insurance companies that did, profit off of slavery and the different businesses, it was shared in the chat that even Brooks Brothers had a suit line for slaves who were being prepped for sale.
Wow.
Because of course they didn't want them looking disheveled, as they often did on the plantations.
Right.
But they wanted them looking, I guess, at their best. So they had a special line, a clothing line for the enslaved when they were being prepared to be sold. So this is the ugly part of the history that people, that that there are certain counties and politicians that they don't want you to know.
Right.
And again, how, like you said, so many different, and even Harvard, the institution of Harvard University, was built off the back of the enslaved and also had slaves serving them.
That's
so
right.
These are things that, and many of the early institutions, for many of them, that was the case, your prestigious institutions.
Right.
And so it's very important that, and I think that Harvard did have some sort of like reparations program of their own for some of the descendants of the enslaved, but it was more about like free education, right? And that's just supposed to be enough.
Yeah. Harvard did something like that. They put aside some money for, like, hey, if you can prove that we own your progenitor, then yeah, you can come to school on us, and then and I believe that Georgetown did something similar, because actually when they sold a lot of their slaves, it actually saved the university, because they were about to go under. you know.
Mm.
So they put together a resolution where they wanted to set aside so much money to pay tuition, room and board for those who could prove, like, again, if your progenitors were owned by us, then we can foot the bill of up to so much amount of money for you to come to school here. Yay.
And the interesting thing that I have an issue with is this idea of, this notion that, and I know that this is one of the arguments of, against reparations, right? Like, how do we prove that we were descendants of slaves when there were some, when there were so many names that were changed?
Mm-hmm.
There were other slaves that were sold off.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many aspects that make it, and we know that, like, once slavery ended, the former enslaved actually made efforts to contact family members, right? So it wasn't just simply that the former enslaved didn't, we just kind of went willy-nilly. There were, like you said, there were efforts, there were towns built, and the reparations case goes beyond the enslaved, because once Reconstruction ended and the terrorist groups were formed, namely the Ku Klux Klan, Blacks lost their lives, businesses, and their livelihoods with no compensation and no accountability on behalf of those who were committing these crimes. So it goes even further than that. Mm-hmm. And so what has been like, what do you, this idea, like you said, of proving that you are a descendant of a slave, why should that even not be an issue to issue, for reparations to begin with?
Well, the United States in a lot of places actually kept pretty good records when it came to, how the enslaved were and how enslaved were. We still have to this day bills of sales. There have been plenty of families that kept like their family Bibles, where they've written down, when such and such was born, what they did for a living. And, at that particular time, if you were Black and a slave, and if like one of your slave people became like a preacher, that was considered high class. And a lot of those particular records actually, are survived today. And I think that another record that is like huge, that can definitely be a catalyst for being able to really go into whether you come from the institution of slavery or not, is the 1870 census. The 1870 census was the first census that was actually done that counted Blacks that were freed about 5 years after they were freed. And before then, slaves that Black immigration before 1965 was to the right of the decimal point. Majority of people who were here were from that institution, or they came over during indentured servitude, like during the 1600s. So it's not as arduous as a task to really determine if you come from that particular institution or not. And I forgot the reason why, but one of the actual theistical institution that has a lot of genealogy records is the Mormon Church. And there's a reason for that. And I wish I should have been more prepared, Mandisa. I would have actually said the Mormons actually keep these particular genealogy records, because I think it has something to do to tie for making sure that they have like a place in their heaven thingy, whatever. That's not this show. But they do have actual genealogists who are trained to actually find people's lines and trees and things of that nature through their library. And oftentimes they will help you to do it for free, to trace back your lineage. Matter of fact, matter of fact, Ancestry.com is owned by the Mormons. And when I had an account, I decided to go ahead and check it out to see, how far I can go back. I was able to find my earliest relative that on my father's side was born in 1800 under slavery in Virginia, and he married at her records say mulatto, but she was half white, half black, and she was also a slave as well. And she was born in 1840 in the institution of slavery. They married after slavery was abolished in like about 1867, 1868. So, and I found that information in one Sunday afternoon because I was curious, and I decided to do a free trial. And I did it starting with the census records. I found like newspaper clippings. In some cases, I was even able to trace like cousins and other people in progeny, and that came from them as well. So it's not it's not this Herculean task that a lot of people think that it's going to be so difficult for you to be able to find out if you were a part of this institution or not.
Right. So what do you say to all of the people who, the pull yourselves up by your bootstraps people, who, despite all of these things institutionally that have impacted Black communities, and we're still able to achieve some sense of progress, but even still, even in spite of that, are still facing, like you said, economic disparities and all of these other disparities as a result of these institutional weapons against us. What do you say to these folks who are just basically saying, well, it's in the past, you should just get over it. And my ancestors had to work hard too, so therefore you have to work hard, as well. So what would you say to all of those naysayers?
Mm.
And before we get into like how we can all work together, what would you say to them?
Yeah, a lot of those people who would, have their, America's a meritocracy type fallacy, I would say history does not show that. The government picks its winners and it picks its losers. And you can't take year after year after year after year, going back centuries, of a government entity creating laws and institutions that disenfranchise you and expect you to be at the level of the dominant society that it actually gave plenty of lift ups over the years. I mean, like, the Homestead Act of 1862 was one of the biggest government handouts that ever came out. And that particular loan legislation created millionaires and lasted for over 100 years. The last acreage of land that was given out in the 1980s before it was finally done. So I can say that, well, hey, if my progenitor was given a land grant of 40 acres, who imagine what we were being able to do with that now, and how that particular asset could have been passed down from generation to generation, so it could have been used to create generational wealth. And also too, this whole notion that, oh well, the problem with Black folk is that they don't work hard enough. We built the country, people. We literally built the country. If you look at Washington, D.C., that was slaves. If you look at a lot of, like you mentioned, Mandisa, like a lot of these Ivy League institutions, they were built by slaves. If you look at the whole, like I said, gross national product of the United States, from its inception that created this capitalistic society that became a world economic power, that is because of slavery. And if you also look at the reason why the United States have not been able to be dominated in wars or even have um, foreign enemies come to our particular shores to take over, is because that Black people also fought in every war. So this whole notion that, oh, you pull up yourself by your bootstraps, we've been pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. But Dr. King said, it is a cruel jest to tell a bootless man to pull himself up by his own bootstraps.
Yes, that is the Dr. King that isn't quoted.
That's right.
by folks.
That's right.
That is the Dr. King that is rarely, if ever, quoted.
That's right.
So what at this point can, folks what can everyday folks do? What should we, be encouraging those who are allies to the Black community do? What that because that is our thing, right?
Right.
We want it's we can talk about it, but also we want people to be about it.
That's right.
So what is it that, especially in the non-religious community, what are some of the main things that they can do and we can also do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, part of it is that support those who are doing the work, like BlackNonbelievers and like other organizations that are actually still that are right, that are have people on the ground that's still pushing for this issue to be done. Also, I am a person that likes a good old letter and a good old phone call, and also visits to your Congress people to say that this is an issue that they care about. Because one of the things that is another argument against reparations, and you've even heard it like on the presidential stage a few times, that it's not popular. And the majority of legislation that has gone out over the years is not necessarily popular. But at this particular point, it's not about what's popular, it's about what's right. And if you are a person that says that this is right and that the descendants of chattel slavery deserve compensation, they deserve their inheritance, and the government is on the hook to pay, they would actually say that that this needs to be done. And, and they would make it an issue, and also hold their elected officials accountable in order for them to be able to make sure that this happens. And, and also don't gatekeep the issue. Like I said, there have been plenty of people who have been on the ground for years in order for this to happen. But we don't want the people to come and say, oh, wait a minute, anything that you can do, I can do better. No, we need for you to stand with us, not before us.
You are absolutely right. Can we, unfortunately, can we talk about some of the division within like the reparations movement, and unfortunately how efforts have been derailed, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have a really hard issue with, unfortunately, cult of personalities that have emerged from this movement, where they kind of like do that whole like only like Trump did, like, you need me and only I can fix this type thing. And it's a group effort. It's not an individual effort. It's going to take a critical mass of people in order to make this thing happen, not just you and the people who say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, and no, sir. And also we have an issue where, we have legacy organizations like Narcan and Cobra, and in some of their offshoots like IB30, IB21, First Repair, and also Reparations United, that have learned how to make reparations a perpetual issue that they have profited from, but the people that they're supposedly supposed to help have not seen any profit or movement from it. A lot of that happens through like a lot of these local initiatives that are happening in different cities and states, and where, people are they're trying to pack their people in order for them to say, like, we need a reparations trust, and we have to have a certain nonprofits run it, and the cities and the states have to pay hundreds and thousands of dollars to this particular nonprofit, oh, by the way, that I run, in order for me to be able to do this thing for you. So, unfortunately, I in any movement, you have these personalities and grifters that happen to emerge from the fray, and it's unfortunate. But one of the things that I recently told a friend of mine who asked me, because like we were discussing some things that we want to do here specifically in Chicago, and especially how to continuously push the conversation to possible legislation about reparations. He asked me, Cynthia, is it still worth it? I said, absolutely, absolutely. You have to this. I mean, it's far beyond me. It's far beyond you. It's far beyond any individual. We have to think about our future right now. We have to think about our children that are behind us. And we have to think about a world that we want them to be in. And right now, this world is not amicable for a Black boy, Black girl. It's not. And a lot of it is because the social and economic protection that should have been afforded to us as citizens has been removed. And we have to fight to get it back.
Absolutely. And I think that it's unfortunate that sometimes these things do become split down party lines.
Yeah.
But it is something that impacts us all as a community. So it's important that we all continue to pay attention and, like you said, speak up, talk to our representatives, which, is not as hard as people think, but of course it can be, it seems more daunting than it is. So just a reminder, if for everyone who's watching, and we appreciate everyone who is live, please drop your questions for myself and Cynthia in the chat. We will answer them live. Hopefully you have learned something about reparations that you didn't already know. There were some aspects that I certainly have been able to take in from this information. And so, yes, please do drop your comments. Please do drop your questions. We appreciate you tuning in. Oh my, that's very interesting, but we just had a troll comment. So, okay. Yeah, your thoughtful comments.
I mean, but look at the handle.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So
look at the handle. Like,
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, America's dead. Okay, dead to what? Anyway, last time I checked, we still have a very active Congress, a very active presidential branch, and also an active judiciary branch. America is still very much so running and alive. And yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So we just had to ban that user.
Yeah.
I was gonna put them in timeout, but hey, yeah, they're again, once again, we appreciate everyone who has thoughtful commentary on this subject. Unfortunately, we see that this tends to bring out some of the some of the ugliness in people. But you know what? It is still a subject and a movement worthy of discussion and worthy of moving forward. So
That's right.
again, this is what we do here at Black Nonbelievers. We bring we bring the community, but we also bring the information, the education, and this is a part of the activism that we do. We encourage everyone. And so, yes, hey, Sheldon, how are you? Had a very, very, yes, in the Caribbean, it was sugar instead of cotton, and also in the southern part of the United States,
That's right.
where states like Louisiana,
Right.
states
Mississippi.
like parts of Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who aren't familiar with the phrase "sell you down the river,"
Mm-hmm.
which was a threat to the northern slaves, because down in those parts where sugarcane was harvested in the United States, the average life expectancy was age 30.
Right.
And probably the average life expectancy of life down there, period, was probably age 30. But for the enslaved, it was even less.
That's right.
So, yes, you are absolutely right that it was sugar, and sugar was very much a commodity
Mm-hmm.
because it would be imported over to Europe.
Yep.
And, it was, and the punishment for anyone caught stealing or eating sugar was horrendous.
Yeah.
So there are a number of books. There was one that I purchased from the Whitney Plantation called Sugar in the Blood, which was about a descendant from a family who owned slaves from the sugar plantations. So yes, there is a lot of literature about about the cruelty that took place in the Caribbean and in particular. Did you want to speak a bit about that, Cynthia?
Sure. Hi, Sheldon. I feel like we have a kindred spirit, for lack of a better term, because even though my father is American from the South, my mother is from Jamaica. So I have a very unique position in this whole conversation about reparations, only because of my personal lineage. And I don't know if you knew that, like, some of Jamaicans that actually came to the United States the after slavery was abolished. Some came as migrant workers to work on the sugarcane plantations in the United States. Matter of fact, my grandfather worked in Mississippi on those sugarcane plantations. That's how he actually got to the United States back in 1943. But there was a definite cruelty that came with those slaves that worked those fields, because it was very, very difficult to harvest sugarcane. And I remember watching a documentary where they dug up some of the bones of the slaves that actually worked on the sugarcane plantations, and you could tell where the muscle was detached from the bone because they worked so hard. Like, they literally worked themselves to death. Matter of fact, now I don't know if this is true, but I was told an anecdote from a relative that, uh, that we may be related to, I believe, Samuel Sharp. And Samuel Sharp was actually a slave in Jamaica who worked on the sugarcane plantations that was trying to organize other slaves to actually form a union. And he was trying to get certain benefits, including longer breaks and more protections. But the slave owners were not having it. The owners were not having it. And there was a revolt. And even though, like, the narrative is that the slaves actually started the revolt, it wasn't true. The plantation owners did. And they killed a lot of slaves that day, including Samuel Sharp. And the only thing that he was really trying to do was get better protections and better conditions for the slaves to work under on the island of Jamaica. But yeah, it was very cruel And especially like, Jamaica's extremely hot. And can you just imagine being under that hot sun trying to like to cut down all those particular trees and all those particular stalks in order for it to do, to bring that field. It's insane. Now, if it was true that he is actually my progenitor, that would be great. I could say that I have Sam Sharp's genetic DNA in my blood, but I'm not really sure if that's the case or not. I know that my mom is a Sharp, but I don't know. But yes, it was extremely cruel and it was extremely horrible, and England also needs to pay Jamaicans descendants of slaves. They just do as well. Yes, sir.
Yes, we had a comment on Facebook,
Hmm.
and I shared it, but I'll read it. Leedy, thank you for tuning in. Says they had an older white lady say, "Why do Black people want to be paid for something that didn't happen to them?" And they said they told her then that white people should give back what their ancestors passed down since they didn't work for it. And that has often been, I mean, it's that plain and simple, right? Um, I say this a lot that one of my favorite groups is Moonchild. They are a predominantly white, like neo soul group.
Hmm.
And they do have a very large Black listenership, not just because their music is good. It really is. I highly recommend it. But at their shows, they we'll get to that in a moment. The
Yeah,
word
sure will.
at every one of their shows, they highlight a Black organization, grassroots organization, that is doing significant work, and they donate to it. And one of the things that Amber, the lead singer, said, she said, if you didn't earn it, give it away.
Mm,
Spend your privilege. That is where and I know you've heard me say this before, Cynthia. I've said it on panels. Spend your privilege.
right.
That is, if allies of Black communities really want to help the work that we do, spend your privilege.
That's right.
Let your money do the talking,
That's right.
and do so with very little, with very little strings attached.
Right.
Do so because you know that it is the right thing to do.
That's right.
And so, yes, that is very much, a very valid sentiment. You didn't earn it.
That's right.
So why do you still have it? Why are you still able to live more than comfortably above the average population if you
Right.
didn't earn it?
That's right.
So let's talk about that as well. Let's chew on that for
Yeah.
a little bit.
Right.
And so, Sheldon, I think you missed the wooden teeth reference. Cynthia, you want to go back to that?
Yeah, it was just, George Washington was said to have wooden teeth. They didn't have very good dental hygiene back in the day. A lot of times people will lose their teeth and really didn't have like, veneers and implants and things of that nature like they do now. So he had wooden teeth. So that's why I was saying that Thomas Paine wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson, but the first president, of course, of the United States under the United States Constitution was George Washington in all his wooden teeth glory.
Yes, indeed.
I love
Yes.
history. Anyway, I
Yes,
do. I
so do
really do.
I. I am
Yeah.
such a history buff and history nerd, and
Mm,
this information is just it is important for everyone to be well versed on and
yeah.
to better understand as to why the case for reparations is valid. And if we pride ourselves on being intellectually honest and intellectually higher than believers, then this is the part of the ugly truth that comes along with shedding religion and encouraging people to educate and be more informed. It's
Right.
not always going to be pretty.
Right.
It's not definitely not going to be flowery.
Right.
And when we're talking about actions that were committed against other human beings, this is an important part of the conversation. It's an important part of the work. So I appreciate everything you've brought to this, Cynthia. Again, I know that you have been working on this for some time, and it definitely aligns with our values at Black Nonbelievers, because this is a part of the racial justice and economic justice that we think is should be should be given and should be paid to the descendants of the enslaved,
That's
which
right.
is pretty much all of us. So, this is, beyond some of the jokes that we've seen, beyond some of the skits, these are very, very serious conversations that still need to take place. And hopefully this is a good start for many in our community, if we want to continue to move forward.
Yeah.
So are there any final thoughts before we move on to announcements?
Yeah, I did also say that, reparations for the descendants of chattel slavery in the United States is not just something that would just help our community. It actually will help the whole United States. I was listening to a news report by Kyle Kalinske from I think it's called Secular Talk is his channel. And he was talking about all the data that was on file for actually how immigrant populations do actually really help the economy of those when they come over to the United States. But one of the main reasons why it can be even more helpful is because certain uh, dispensations and compensations are given to those particular immigrant groups so that they can invest back into the economy and invest back into the infrastructure of the country. So if you can imagine being able to grant to actually pull the trigger on reparations and target the affected group, the money is not going to go into, and I know that Dave Chappelle came up with this whole very racist skit from back in the day on his show about how like black people is just going to blow it on like Jordans and trucks and all types of crazy things. But it's actually going to go back into the actual whole of the United States. And everybody is going to benefit. Other businesses are going to benefit. You're going to have, people with more capital so that they can spend and then spend it right into the economy. They're going to improve their lives. They're going to improve their home situation. They're going to improve their debt situation. They're going to invest it into businesses and be able to hire more people. All the things that we were doing previous to white terrorism. From the turn of the century. So it's an important issue, yes, but it's an issue that needs to actually become a reality so that all of us right here will be able to benefit from it.
Absolutely. And on that note, thank you so much once again for joining me for this discussion. It has been a pleasure. Again, thank you to everyone who has tuned in and who has joined in the chat. And we hope that you will continue to support Ian's work. Hey, Darren. Hey, everybody who tuned in. Again, we appreciate you all. So we look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. And we just have a few announcements before we go. We will be announcing 2 new board members for Black Nonbelievers very soon. It is a part of us building back better as an organization. I'm very, very excited about our 2 new board members. And we are still looking for more. We will share more of that information. Actually, it's in the description if you are interested in being a board member for Black Nonbelievers. We definitely hope you will consider doing so. So, yes, and coming up, if you are in the Philadelphia area, join our Philly affiliate, as they visit. They had to reschedule their visit to the Paul Robeson House. There is a $10 fee for that, but if you are available this coming Saturday, March 2nd, please do please do join our Philadelphia affiliate as they continue the Black history that is 365 days a year beyond Black History Month. And also on March 16th, our Charlotte affiliate will be visiting the International African American Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. And we hope that you will join them for that. That is a one-day event. But if you are in the Charlotte area, or if you are in Charleston, or know anyone in Charleston that would like to join our Charlotte affiliate for this, please do spread the word and meet them down there for this trip. We hope that you will join up, and we are always posting things. Please do. We're going to wrap up this episode of the special edition episode of In the Cut, closing out Black history with our referendum on reparations. We hope that you will again join us. We air regularly every first and third Saturday of each month. We're going to take a break this Saturday because we held this special episode. First time we've ever done so. First time we've ever took a little break from the norm. But we have consistently kept up our programming, and especially for this show. And we hope you enjoy it. So please do like and share this video. Watch the replay for anything you may have missed. Also, again, BNC Con is back for 2024. We will be on Independence of the Seas with stops to Labadee, Haiti, and Falmouth, Jamaica, which is near Montego Bay. Featured speakers this year include Chris Cameron, Candace Gorham, Dragnot Mims, Christy Puckett, Teddy Reeves, and more. Prices start at just $600 per person for double occupancy and includes cabin fare, taxes, port fees, multiple dining options, and convention registration. Woo! And that in the chat there. And again, we are still looking for new board members. We would like to at least have 7 board members to help continue to do the work of Black Nonbelievers on the national level. And we are, of course, always looking for affiliate leaders. Cynthia can use some help in Chicago. We can use more help here in Atlanta. We would love to have folks step up to be in leadership at Black Nonbelievers. So yes, please do. There is a volunteer form on our website. And also, Cynthia and I are members of the Godless Gospel Music Ensemble, which is still looking for singers, particularly tenors. If you have some musical chops and you would like to be a part of this project, please do audition. This is a paid opportunity that is spearheaded by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. But yes, please do join us for this project and look for more information about where we will be appearing, notably in New York City in June in the summer. So we will have more information about that very, very soon. So happy to be singing with Cynthia and some of our other comrades that are on the project, and we'd love to have you be a part of it. Once again, we encourage you to subscribe to Black Nonbelievers. Follow us all over social media. We are on Facebook at Black Nonbelievers, X, formerly Twitter, at BNonbelievers, the B in our capitalized. We are on Instagram at BNonbelievers Inc. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch this video and more. We are getting closer and closer to being monetized. So the more you watch, the more our hours go up, and you can start dropping us super chats. And we can give shout outs to those who give us super chats through YouTube. So to Godless Gospel, if you click on the link there is a preview of the songs that we sing. It is gospel music without God. It is
Yes.
amazing. It is so great. And it is exactly what it says. It is godless gospel music. And shout out to Andre Forbes and Dan Barker, who are the producers, the executive producers of this project. They've come up with some amazing music for it. And it has been collaborative in where we have worked together to tweak some of the styles that we incorporate in there. And so it's really a collaborative and working effort amongst all of us, and it has just been so wonderful. Yes, please do. If you are in, you can find your local affiliate on our website. You can find we are on Meetup. Join all of them. We share our virtual events as well as our national information, and and in-person events and virtual things that we do, like this show. So we hope that you will join us for all of it. And of course, we cannot do this without your financial support. Your donations to Black Nonbelievers are tax deductible, and it goes towards our ability to host this show. We do still co-sponsor the Hurston Student Scholarship for Black non-religious students, and more. We do outreach, we do tabling, we do some of everything here at BN, and your financial support does make a difference. So please do consider your support for us. And you can also sport your BN swag. We have we have shirts, hoodies, mugs, shot glasses, bumper stickers, and more on our website. Yes, you do hear my grandkitty, Miss in the background. So we love the cats around here.
I know mine's floating around here somewhere.
Yeah, we have alias cats. So
Yes.
so please do visit our store, and purchase your swag. If there is something that we don't happen to have in stock at the time, we will eventually ship it to you. And you can catch us at a tabling event near you, or also and at the national events that we host, like BNC Con. We will also once again be at Dragon Con in Atlanta this year for those who are enthusiasts. So yes, so please do buy your BN swag, and you can support our organization more. And so with that, we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Once again, thank you, Cynthia, for all of the wonderful information. We hope you like and share this video, and we will see you once again very soon. Take care and good evening.
Bye, everybody.